What's up, dogs? We've got one of the elusive third-party RF lenses here, the Rokinon 85mm, and it is a beaut. As always, sample images throughout, and shout out to my Insta peeps who already got some sneak peeks. Right into the content, I'll hit you with the good, the bad, and the very many options you have at the 85mm focal length for the Canon RF mount. For the build, very solid. Not bad. Not quite at that Canon L level, but it is weather sealed. It is surprisingly light for how big the front element is and comes with a hood. At just over 1 pound and weighing slightly less than the Samyang or Rokinon 14mm, it's a welcome change up from some of the heavier lenses that I've rented lately. There isn't much else on the body besides the auto manual focus switch, so you won't have IS on this lens and you won't have a control ring. The focus ring is nice and wide, chunky little guy. It turns pretty smoothly, but it could be a little bit smoother. And the 77mm filter thread is common as well. I did put on my Moment Cine Bloom filter for some of the shots that I took at the coffee shop while testing this lens. On to quality, I feel like a broken record, guys, but with these RFs, they are sharp, they are fast to focus, and pretty quiet. For this lens specifically, not quite as good as something like the RF 70-200 f4, but it's right there in that neighborhood. I'll admit it. Right now, my name is Daniel Joshua and I'm a bokeh fiend. That's why I wanted to grab this lens and it did not disappoint. It's got a razor thin focus plane when you are wide open at 1.4 and I most certainly overdid that look, but it's an 85-1.4. What would you have expected me to do? I opened it up and I started blast. I really am trying to lean into more of that adventure photography or whatever you would call the combination of landscape, portrait, and product in the outdoors. And I feel like this lens is made precisely for that. No nasty chromatic aberration, and overall very, very happy. This would at least be something I would consider buying in the future, potentially. I'm not sure if I love the 85 focal length. We'll get to that. But in terms of quality and performance, this is a good get. I think I would need to take a little bit of time to get more comfortable with 85 as a prime length. I think I would need to take a little bit of time to evaluate my other lenses and see if I fall out of favor with any of them, given how my needs are changing, but definitely something I could buy, and at this price point, I think it's a good buy. And speaking of price, I think this is priced appropriately. I've actually been, and I know I still haven't reviewed it, but I'm very happy with the Samyang 14mm and the price that was for an autofocus lens with weather sealing as a nice sharp prime. It is certainly miles ahead of the Canon flagship 1.2s. Now Lensrentals carries Rokinon over Samyang, and I think the Samyang on Amazon is actually a little bit cheaper. It's priced at $630 as opposed to $658, which the Rokinon is currently going for. On to the bad. And these last couple reviews, there hasn't been much bad. There's a little bit more here, so buckle up. There is no image stabilization on the lens itself. And in my use cases, I'm not personally gonna miss that too much. I want the image stabilization on the lens if it exists, but for me, this is a photo first bokeh blaster, and I don't necessarily require that. The Canon 85mm f2, that semi-macro lens, does have image stabilization, like the 35 that I'm filming with now. But obviously those Canon 1.2s, those big flagship lenses, don't have image stabilization either. If you absolutely need an 85 1.4 with image stabilization, you can still get that on the EF mount. I think that lens is pretty expensive. I've never used it, but it's out there, at least for now. The minimum focus distance is 3 feet, which, you know, kind of standard, but I found to be a bit of a bummer. Certainly did not love it. Multiple times after I first unboxed this, I was trying to get in real tight on some stuff and kept getting that very unsatisfying red ring or red box on my focus point, signaling that I was too close to focus. I'm definitely spoiled by using the 70-200 f4 recently, as that focus is as close as 2 feet. But I did get used to that over the course of these 2 weeks. An 85 prime, I found a little funny, honestly. I think at times it seemed too tight, and in other circumstances, I felt spoiled by having the 100mm macro as kind of the fill-in for what I would use this for. It's kind of like I couldn't find the right situations where 85 was perfect. I think that's my own inexperience using longer primes. Even when I was using the 100mm macro more, that was on the Canon T7i. And so it was functioning as a 160mm. I haven't used it all that much as a true 100 on either the R6 or the RP. Because of this, and knowing that I was pleasantly surprised using the new Nifty 50, I would love to rent the 50mm 1.2 just to see if I can get the best of both worlds, to be able to have that slightly more distant framing while still having a wide open aperture. Finally, in the bad, we've got a little lens station firmware situation. As I dug into this a little bit deeper, you need a lens firmware update to be able to take advantage of the IBIS in the newer Canon cameras. And that turns out to be a hassle. You need to purchase a lens dock to be able to do that. And that's all it can be used for. So that's annoying. I would say that's not as big of a deal, even for people using this indoors in low light, because you're gonna need to crank that shutter a little bit at events anyway in order to freeze motion. But if you're going to use this for lots of video work, you're probably gonna wanna go and buy that, even though it's kind of like a single-use appliance. I'm actually not even sure if this particular copy has been updated. If I can get an answer before this video goes live, I'll put it somewhere, but I don't think I can check without having the lens dock myself. Down low, someone please correct me if I could have. Bottom line is that this isn't something that caused an issue for me personally. And again, this lens might already have the firmware, and so maybe that's why I didn't notice. The IBIS was working correctly. But it's just something to keep in mind. If anyone else has gone through the experience of updating this lens to be used on the R6 or R5, let us know how painful that is or isn't in the comments below. You've got a ton of options for the RF85 Prime. And I want to share something that's very exciting. You can now use my affiliate link below and code YOSHUA15, YOSUA15, at checkout to save 15% at lensrentals.com, whether it's your first order or not. This Rokinon guy is my first 85mm prime. I was a little bit nervous about the focal length and wouldn't have gone out and bought this blindly anyway, as I've never shot with an 85 prime before. I've been waffling back and forth by the day about whether to sell my EF 100mm macro and adapter, but that's the closest I have to something like this. And I'm at a point where I don't want to buy any other lenses unless I'm also moving something along. Joining an affiliate program might seem like something small, but it's something that I'm really pumped about. It's that classic win-win-win relationship. I will be able to make these reviews more sustainably, given that I'm getting some kind of kickback for anybody that uses those links. You're going to save some money yourself, and lensrentals.com is going to get some extra traffic, and frankly, they deserve it. Every time I've rented from them has been a joy. They're always on time, their lenses are extremely well protected, usually soft and hard case with a UV filter. And because they have all sorts of brands and they are neutral in that respect, as a reviewer, I can say whatever the hell I want about the manufacturer without any fear. Rokinon, Samyang, whoever you are, this is solid. I'm not sure if I'm in love with the focal length as much as I expected, but this has the same build as the Samyang 14mm I have. It worked great while I had it, and I think that this is the affordable choice for most seeking the 85. Now, Canon has multiple offerings at the 85mm focal length, and their 85mm macro is most similar, or at least in price. When you dig into it, there are actually a lot of differences. Namely, as a 1:2 macro, the Canon 85mm f2 can focus much more closely at around a foot. I would love that, big time, big time. It's image stabilized and built just like the 35mm, as I said earlier, and that's largely a good thing, but it won't have weather sealing. When I'm out with the R6, I really do want that paired with something weather sealed, so I don't have a care in the world if it's raining or snowing. And you can't quite tell here, but during our hike, a lot of these shots, it's just constantly drizzling, and it's just never anything that crosses my mind anymore, which is really, really nice. And finally, the Canon is an f2, so if you really need that low light, or you're about that bokeh life, this one might be the one for you. Now, if 1.4 isn't fast enough for your taste, don't you worry. Canon happily has two solutions for you at 1.2, the regular and defocus smoothing. I want to try one of those flagship primes so badly, but I think I'll likely rent the 50mm to see if that gives me the wider angle that I feel like I want when shooting on site, but still keep that fast aperture. But I am no monster. I will give the people what they want. You let me know what I should rent in Colorado, and I'll pick it up and cover it in the next several months. It's been a long time since I've got to shoot in Colorado, but that's exactly what I'll be doing on my extended trip. This is one of the last videos you will ever see in this space, so a huge shout out to everyone on board so far. It's been fun, and it will be funner. Funnest? We're gonna have so much fun.